Satin stitch is a series of neat, smooth stitches that are used to cover an area of your embroidery design. For example, I used it here to create this doorway and to also stitch these paving slabs. It's a great stitch for filling slightly smaller areas as well, so I used it for these plant pots. To help keep my stitches neat and tidy, I've drawn some guidelines onto my fabric, and this is what we're going to stitch between in a minute. So to start with, I've got my 6 strands of thread and a nice sharp needle. I'm starting off by pushing my needle up through the fabric in line with that top guideline, and I'm just going to pull my thread all the way through. Now just moving down to the line below, I'm just going to line it up and I'm going to pull that thread all the way through, and that is our first satin stitch. The aim here is to fill the area between the lines with a series of satin stitches, but ideally I want to keep these as neat as possible, so I'm going to break it down into smaller sections. So I'm just going to work my way along the line and just create these smaller areas by dividing them up with a stitch. This isn't something that you have to do, but I found it really helpful, and I just found that it keeps my stitches straighter as well. It's a good thing to do when you're working with bigger areas as well, which can look a little bit more scary, and this just helps break them down into smaller sections. My smaller sections are now ready to be filled with stitches, so I'm going to start with a section on the right hand side by pushing my needle up through the fabric and pushing it back down at the lower line. And then just pull your thread all the way through, and we've got our first stitch. For the second stitch, we are going to do exactly the same, so we're going to push the needle through at the top line and then push it back through at the lower line, pulling the thread all the way through. And I'm going to repeat this until the section is filled with stitches. So I've now finished the first section, and now I'm going to work my way through the other sections using the exact same method. So I've worked my way along the lines, and I'm just going to add in the final stitches just to fill that last gap. One thing I always say about satin stitch is that it's worth taking the time to practice. Grab yourself a scrap piece of fabric and some thread and just draw yourself out some lines and get practicing. Depending on the effect that you're going for in your design, you can also separate your strands out, so you could do satin stitch with fewer strands if you're stitching something that's a little bit more delicate. So here is our finished satin stitch. It's looking nice and neat with the help of those guidelines. Will you be giving this one a go? Let me know in the comments. Thank you so much for watching, and happy stitching.